Oops. We're live, guys. We're live.
I think that's going to be your answer for the first question.
Oops. Man.
What up?
Yeah, no, because like you have to like click it, right? And then it'll go away. But I clicked it twice by accident, so it went away and came back. So it is
Jazz hands, right? Jazz hands, like when you're in your race car.
Exactly.
For anyone that doesn't know, that's how Lewis shifts gears in his. He's got a few thousand horsepower or so in his race car, and he goes to the drag strip. And if you ever seen his race channel, you ever see like videos of his interior while he's going down the strip, you see his hands. This nickname for him is called Jazz Hands, where he's every time he's shifting, he's like. So I guess now we know it applies to the computer too.
Oh man. So yeah, we're live, guys. Sorry if my voice sounds weird. I have some really bad allergies going on. So taking medicine, just started taking medicine, so hopefully it goes away in a few days, but it is what it is. How was last week? How's the school going and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, so I think like almost like clockwork, summer's over. We're now like in fall, and it's been picking up again for me last couple of weeks. I talked to you about this personally, but my school, we did like a tabling event at this big festival that happens in my town. Well, the town where my dojo is. Mm-hmm. And I'd never heard of it before, and it's only a couple, literally just like 2 traffic lights away from my dojo. So I was glad I attended. I had got a lot of interest from a lot of people there, and yeah, it was really good. We had a raffle and everything. Gave a couple people like free month of classes and stuff, and cool. So they're about to start coming in, and I've had some other folks coming in just from like organic leads. So yeah, I mean it's starting to slowly pick up again. How about you?
Yeah, it's been going pretty decent, I guess. I would say it's like you said, it's definitely picked up since the kids have gone back to school. But yeah, I mean it's pretty normal. Hopefully usually October is usually a really, really good month because everyone's settled into their routine, and hopefully we'll see a spike in business. But this month wasn't too bad as well. So
yeah,
I guess you can say we're on the up and up, right? So
yeah, yep.
But yeah, so tonight we're gonna talk about embarrassing moments while training. We're going to talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and its evolution. And we're going to talk about tournaments, which I have a tournament coming up October 19th. If you're a student of mine, you should definitely sign up for it. It's going to be a great time. We're going to have lots of fun. That's actually one thing I forgot to do. You reminded me I forgot to do something today. Have to order all the awards for the tournament still. So
yeah, that's a big one. You've got 19 days.
Yeah, so got to order all that stuff and make sure it gets in here on time. And yeah,
yeah, I'm excited for that too. I can't wait to see what it's like.
Yeah, it's a first year for us to do it. I'm sure there's going to be some hiccups, and we're going to learn from them, and then apply it to the following year, and hopefully it gets bigger and bigger every year.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. How are you? Good evening.
Ahmed is one of my friends. Hey, how's it going? Thank you. I think it actually might be a filter. I'm not actually that radiant. I think there might be some like default filter on here.
He's glowing.
Plus, I'm glowing. Plus, I put some like lotion on right before.
He must be pregnant. He's glowing.
That's true. Yeah. It was just that time.
So yeah. So I guess we can start off with most embarrassing moments while
You
training.
first.
Oh
Not it.
man. So there's a few that come up in my mind. Um, you only have one?
What?
Do you
Do I
only
have one?
Yeah, do you only have one?
You would be surprised, but I have one that has happened multiple times. The same one.
Gotcha.
And I think this goes true. And I guess I'll just start, right? Because it's kind of a segue into it anyway. I think this is true for anyone that has taken martial arts seriously. I forgot who said it, but there was a quote from a female martial artist. I saw a meme of it online yesterday. It looked like she was like, there was a picture of her in the background of the meme where she's like in a BJJ tournament. I don't know who she was. But anyway, she said, if you haven't farted while training, you don't take martial arts seriously enough. And lo and behold, that's happened to me a couple times. I mean, especially like, all right. So the first time this happened was, when we were in our dojo in Delaware, where you and I started training together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was maybe like, I don't know, 1 or 2 years or so after I started. So maybe a little while after you started there at that school. And so it was a technique where, someone has you like in guard and you're sitting down, like, on your butt, you're leaning back and you grab their belt and you're rolling your knuckles into like their lower, like abdomen.
Yeah,
And then you
yeah.
kind of lean in on it. No, sorry, the roles were reversed. I was the one pulling guard. So that was part of the technique. We're like drilling it. So someone did that to me. I guess I don't remember. I guess I ate like before coming to class. And all of a sudden you just hear, and the worst part is like, I don't know what kind of reaction I would have wanted for it to feel better. Like, because everyone was silent, and I feel like that made it worse. But I feel like maybe if someone was laughing, then I could have laughed it off with them, but no one
What?
was.
Wait, so it was a silent fart?
No, it was loud. It was like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it was like everyone in the dojo heard it. I don't remember if you were there or not at that time, but
Gotcha.
everyone heard it and no one said anything, and I think that's what made it worse. A couple other times that happened later on, but then like everyone laughed about it, so it didn't feel as bad, right? It was kind of a mutual thing. I mean, how many times have you heard like your students or that happen to other people? It's pretty common. I've seen it happen at like BJJ schools too. So
Yeah,
that's my embarrassing moment.
mine's similar. So you were there when it happened. We were in Florida, down at Alex's dojo, which was in Orlando. We were there for one of our black belt seminars, I believe. And our previous teacher
Yeah.
decided to do this technique to me where and mind you, when I travel, my stomach is always a mess.
Oh yeah, it
'Cause
is. I remember.
yeah, my stomach is always a mess. There's nothing I can do. Like, my body knows I am not doing my normal routine. My body knows I'm not eating normal. It's all it's it's crazy. When I come back from a trip, it's like you don't want to be next to me, is what I'm saying, right? So but anyway, so I was pretty bloated that day, and our previous teacher had me like lay down on the mat, with my stomach down on the floor, and he decides to do this technique on me where he like jumps on my back, right? Like with his
I think I
knees.
remember.
And
I think I remember.
as soon as he jumps on my back, it was just
I remember he got up.
he got
and he
up
was just
so
like,
fast.
like he tried his best to keep his serious face. He was like, he got up, he turned around, he's just shaking his head, walked away.
And it was like it's his fault, like You don't jump on somebody's stomach like that, you know?
Wasn't that when like Chris, Errol, and I were there too, and we actually tested for our jujitsu, I think, Shodan at that time. That
It might
wasn't
have
that
been.
like when he was sharing our previous teacher was sharing the big Aikido dojo. We did Joe that weekend, Joe staff
No,
training as
I
well.
think
It
it
wasn't
was
that?
in I think yeah. Yeah, I think it was that same
Yeah.
time.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Um,
That's funny.
yeah. So that
Honestly,
was
I want to hear everyone else's like embarrassing comments. Like leave that in the comments. I mean, embarrassing
yeah.
moments in
Yeah.
martial arts.
Yeah, if you have
Um,
an embarrassing moment while training, please um, comment
yeah,
below.
share it.
Um, another one happened recently, another farting story. I was teaching this just happened like probably like a month or two ago, right? Um, I don't know what happened, but like I think we were doing sword, like or something like that. Like um and I get into Kamai, right? I get into my stance and just one just comes out, right? It's just
As
like,
you're getting into stance,
yeah,
like you didn't even do a movement yet.
yeah, it was weird.
Is it one
Like
of those low stances? Because that makes it a lot funnier.
that's how you can tell we're just getting older and body parts are not body parts are not working.
Look, for
It's the
everyone else
same way.
watching this, when I get lower, my knees start cracking.
Body parts are not working like they used to, you know. And I just get into my stance and it just went "Burp," right. It was a little quick one, right? And then and then I look at my students and a couple of them are like other ones are like trying to be serious, you know.
So what would you do
Usually
if
the
they laugh?
I mean nothing, like,
Okay.
but I was kind of laughing because I was just like I literally said oops out loud because it was
So
totally silent, you know.
look, I like that approach because honestly, I think it's like you own it when you do that, right? I think
Right,
it's so much more awkward when I think it's like older people than the generations before you and I. Like when they fart, like in public, they just keep silent and expect everyone else to keep silent.
right,
And like that's just like I think that just makes it so much worse.
right.
Like
Yeah.
they don't own it. They're just like, shut the hell up. Like,
Yep.
you know, you're
Yep.
not allowed to say anything. And I think that just makes it a lot funnier.
Yeah. So,
So for anyone else, if you do that in class, for anyone that's new to martial arts and you accidentally fart in class, because if you have not farted in a martial arts class, then you probably haven't been training long enough. And when that time comes for you, if it hasn't already, make sure you own it
yep,
and have a laugh because it will feel a lot more awkward for you and everyone else.
exactly. Like, no, I agree. It's and you get hit in the stomach a lot and stuff in martial
Yeah.
arts training, and your stomach
Any
gets
like sudden impact.
yeah, and your stomach gets pushed on and things like that
Mhm.
when you're grappling, and but yeah. I have another embarrassing moment when I was little. Um, I couldn't. It was during a belt test. And I couldn't break a board, which was weird because like I did it like many times before. So I think it was like the pressure of like people like watching and stuff. Um, so yeah, like obviously it was very embarrassing. They gave me like 30 tries. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I didn't pass the test, right?
Oh wow.
Um,
Wait, how old were you?
I was was probably like 8.
Wow, I'm
7.
surprised they failed you because nowadays that usually doesn't happen. I don't know
Oh
what belt it
no.
was like.
It was like a blue belt test or something like that.
Oh, okay, that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, it was um yeah, it was definitely, I guess, a little embarrassing because it made me want to quit
Hmm.
afterwards. And my parents were like, "No, you're not quitting. Like, you know, go back over there and do it again." And then my teacher let me retest again in class, and I broke it in class.
Hmm.
So I don't know. So
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. I think sound like you were nervous.
yeah, probably.
I thought this was gonna end up as like another fart one. That
No, it
you were gonna
wasn't. It
You're
wasn't
gonna
a
break the
far,
board and then like you farted or something, or
wasn't
you hit it and you didn't break it and you farted, but
it
guess not.
wasn't a far one,
That was,
but
that was a lot sadder than I thought it would be.
I'm sure some of my students, when they grow up, they'll tell their story. I've had students pee on themselves.
Oh
I've
wow,
had students poop on themselves in white
wow.
peas. Oh yeah, um,
I think
yeah.
we should all have like brown geese, just in case.
Oh man. But yeah, so nobody's gonna tell us their embarrassing story, I guess. I'm not seeing anything in the comments.
Yep.
Slackers.
Maybe we'll get it later when we upload this onto our channels.
Right, right. So yeah, so I wanted to talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and its history and evolution. Um just because this is a funny topic to me because most BJJ practitioners don't actually know where their martial art comes from. And it's not to just to prove a point, but it's just a little history lesson. It's like I think I told you this story many times. When I first got my own dojo,
Oh yeah,
I put some signage up in the windows and stuff, and we teach Japanese jujitsu. So Japanese jujitsu is spelled Ju, you know, not with an I. It starts with Ju, um, Ju, right? It's not Jiu, right?
yeah.
So, um, so somebody walks into my school, this young, I guess, arrogant guy. He's like, "Hey, just want to let you know that you spelled jujitsu wrong." And he's like, starts laughing, like,
Are you serious?
on his way out, like, and I go, "No, I spelled it right." And he's like, "Ha, right?" Like, like
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
And it's like, he's obviously doesn't know what he's talking about
yeah,
because, you know, um, JIU is more is the modern version of how you spell it.
yeah.
So I have a video here. A lot of people don't know that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu uh, came from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, which Japanese Jiu-Jitsu eventually became Judo, and then Judo became BJJ. So I have a little video here. It's a 5-minute video that gives like pretty much the history on BJJ for those of you that don't know. Hold on one second here.
Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, or simply BJJ, is one of the most influential martial arts of the modern day. It has touched the lives of thousands throughout the whole world.
Is this
But where
Rokas?
how has
It
it
is.
all started? Hi, my name is Rogos Leo, and today we are going to look at the brief history of BJJ. Although the name of BJJ strongly emphasizes Jiu-Jitsu, not everyone knows that its roots are actually that much closer to Judo than one could think. It all started in Japan in the late 1800s, when Professor Jigoro Kano started reinventing the traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, which was then losing its popularity because of the changing times of the Meiji Restoration and the end of the samurai class. Sensei Kano was strongly influenced by Jiu-Jitsu himself, which helped him not only become stronger, but also a better person, what led him to the passion of sharing his experience. And the more he taught traditional Jiu-Jitsu, the more he realized that he wanted to change the emphasis of his style so that it would be not only more efficient, but also more accessible and profound. As his art grew and became widely known, he slowly started introducing the name of Judo, the gentle way, yet to the most it was still known as simply Kano's Jiu-Jitsu. In 1904, one of the senior students of Sensei Kano, Mitsuyo Maeda, together with a couple of other Kano students, were offered a chance to move to the States, which they saw as a great chance to further promote the already increasingly popular Kano's Jiu-Jitsu. Their demonstrations were very well received across the whole nation, and in further years, Maeda even traveled around Europe to give demonstrations there as well. In 1914, Maeda ended up in Brazil, where he continued to give demonstrations. A series of his demonstrations were presented in a circus in Belém, where he met Gustavo Gracie, a business partner at the circus, and became good friends. In 1917, Gustao's son Carlos Gracie, at the time only 15 years old, was so impressed by Maeda's demonstration that he decided to start learning from him. Maeda took on Carlos and a few other Brazilians as his students, teaching them his way of jiu-jitsu. Although technically it was already judo, one of the brothers of Carlos in a much later interview said that he learned of the name judo only in 1950s when judo was introduced as a sport in Brazil, and that Maeda himself referred to his style simply as jiu-jitsu. Carlos Gracie dedicated himself to the study of this jiu-jitsu and later on shared his knowledge with his siblings, from which most notably was Helio Gracie. Carlos and his brothers were often training, what sometimes involved even actual fighting. Yet Helio was not able to join the brothers since he was too frail and sickly. Nevertheless, he continued to watch his brothers train and slowly started developing his own training methods and techniques, which relied less on physical strength and more on skills. As the Gracies, alongside Helio, continued to develop their jiu-jitsu to be as effective as possible, judo was slowly emphasized more as a sport, focusing less on ground techniques. With time, these differences between the two styles became increasingly evident, what today makes them hardly recognizable as ones being so close to each other. In 1925, Carlos opened the Gracie family's first BJJ academy. The academy was managed by his family members, of which most also practiced jiu-jitsu. During this period, the Gracies not only taught their martial art, but also participated and even organized their own ruleless fights, which were back then known as vale-tudo. The Gracies were able to win most of their fights and thus became famous. Their students started including famous artists, architects, politicians, and various doctors. Later on, members of the Gracie family moved on to the States to further promote their art. Here they started organizing the Gracie Challenges, open events which invited masters of different martial arts to challenge members of the Gracie family and their style of jiu-jitsu. Horion Gracie, son of Helio, even offered $100,000 to anyone who could defeat him or his brothers in these matches. Following the success of these events, the Gracies became notorious in the martial arts world. To differentiate between the other jiu-jitsu styles that were present in the day, they started referring to their style as the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, or was sometimes referred to simply as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The fame of the Gracies was already high, yet Horion wanted to make it even more popular to the main public. In 1993, this desire eventually led to the creation of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, or UFC, which was co-hosted by Horion. It was a no-holds-barred event similar to that of vale-tudo and the Gracie Challenges. It was promoted to find out who would be the strongest fighter, bringing 8 different practitioners of various martial arts to fight each other. Horion handpicked Royce Gracie, his younger brother, to represent the Gracie family. Royce was able to win the tournament mostly by using his jiu-jitsu skills. The UFC proved to be very successful, thus bringing a huge amount of attention, especially to the winning style of the event. Although already relatively successful, after the event, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu popularity skyrocketed. Many people of the time started seeing it as the most effective martial art, with other fighters even implementing its skills to their regime too. These events led to hundreds of thousands of people training BJJ throughout the whole world, not only in MMA, but also in its own popular sport form.
So yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that was good. It was a good, very good short summarized version of history of BJJ. I mean, there's, I think it'd be helpful to add a little bit of context in there as well. I think, and yeah, that's a good question. Actually, let me answer, Ahmed's question. I personally think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu should be in the Olympics. I think that would be.
I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they
Yeah.
have judo in there, so why not BJJ? So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's already obviously so globally popular.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as far as the history, right? So Kano, right? Jigoro Kano, the guy that the teacher of Mitsuyo Maeda, who was the teacher of the Gracies, right? So going back to Jigoro Kano, it's interesting to know that one of his martial systems of study was called Yoshinru. And Yoshinru is known, there's different categories under Yoshinru. There was Hantai Yoshinru, Takagi Yoshinru, which sounds obviously familiar. You and I have trained extensively in Takagi Yoshinru. And then there's like different variations of Yoshinru, but it's all Yoshinru, but they have like few different people teaching Yoshinru, so they kind of have like their own name in there. So
Mhm.
Takagi was one of them. Then there's Hantai, right? Then there's like 3 or 4 others. But that was one of his main systems. And so for anyone else that's wondering, like, you know what I mean by like, these systems, these are called Ruha. For anyone that doesn't know what Ruha are, these are martial like traditions,
Tradition.
martial
Yeah.
like, family styles, right? You have to understand in the 1900s, a lot of late 1800s, I'd say mostly 1900s, martial arts in Eastern, like in Japan, were overly simplified. They were just called karate, or aikido, or whatever, like judo, or. But historically, and this is why when people ask Lewis and I what we teach or what we train in, it's it's funny because we can give so many different answers and they're all correct because it's hard to categorize them. So originally they weren't. It wasn't that simple. It wasn't just, oh yeah, I just do jujitsu. No, it's like that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So, for example, one family style, let's say, Kukishinru, which is, very, very old system. In Kukishinru, you had striking, you had grappling, you had sword, you had staff, you had, all these different types of weapons in there, different types of martial arts. And so when you said you wouldn't say you studied karate or jujitsu, you said I studied Kukishinru.
Right.
So, and same thing, Takagiru was another one. And, Yoshinru was another one. And then you have to get even more specific. I studied the Takagi Yoshinru style. So this is historically what, martial arts were like in Japan. And this is actually more of what, our background, most of our background is Lewis and I in training. So it's very important to understand there's a very clear link between Jigoro Kano and, old school jujitsu. Now, when he's obviously he passed on his teachings to one of his brightest students, Mitsuyo Maeda, and Maeda traveled the world, competed in Europe and stuff like that, in America, and he was competing a lot. But I think the one thing I want to mention is why the transition from like jujitsu to judo, right? And he kind of Rokas in the video kind of touched on it a little bit, and he said, because it was I forgot what he said. It was saying something about like they were getting it was on its way out. Jiu-jitsu was on its way out, right? I don't think he explained it much more than that. But really, what was happening is, I mean, this was the age of samurai was pretty much done. As Japan was moving away from like um, uh, under a shogunate, which is a Tokugawa shogunate, they were moving towards establishing power towards the emperor again. And the emperor is, he wanted to bring in more like European influence and stuff, wanted to establish more of like a Western laws and whatnot. So anyway, they decided, they want Western laws. They don't want samurai anymore. They were getting abolished. And so walking around with swords and stuff like that every day wasn't really, obviously, that got outlawed. And, so, using stuff like jujitsu, which is the main purpose was to kill, especially, fighting on the battlefield, which is a completely different mindset from fighting in an, excuse me, from, an organized match. That's why they transitioned from jujitsu to judo. And that
Yeah.
was, I feel like I wanted to add that in because I think that was a really important piece to understand, the transition of jujitsu to judo.
Right. Yeah. So, um, and if you paid close attention to the video clips, you'll see like, you know, the Gracie's using judo while during a match. You know what I mean? It wasn't all just ground game. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of BJJ practitioners forget that it's not all just ground game. You know what I mean? Can't be all ground game, especially when it comes to self-defense. You have to know your stand up as well. You have to know your striking. And that's why you have your, mixed martial artists
Mm.
study, your striking art. They study, a throwing art, and also study a ground art, right? So, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because again, do you think? So here's a question for you: do you think it's important? And I'll give you my opinion on it as well. Do you think it's important for students to know their history and what they're learning. Like say you didn't teach Japanese martial arts, right?
Yeah.
Say you were a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school. Do you think it'd be important for your students to know about where it's coming from?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, other than, other than like just, pure interest of history, and other than, something like just knowing it for the sake of knowing it, there is like, it's actually helpful to know the history. Because like, for example, obviously if you learn the details of why the transition happened, it'll help you understand why certain techniques are taught, in a certain way. A lot of times, I've been asked, it's almost every single class, actually. I get asked by at least one student, why are we doing it this way, right? Why are we doing this technique this way? And now when you have the context, or the historical context even, right, it always helps to know. It's
Yeah.
very, very important for students to know their history, know where your art came from. And, the main thing is so you just don't look like a fool.
Right.
Because there's a lot of, I hate to say this because I love BJJ as an art. I think the practitioners, especially out in like, I'm going to say in like the US primarily, US and in England and Australia, I'd say those are definitely the loudest people in the martial arts world. And I don't mean that in a positive sense, right? Now, the higher level you go, especially towards the Gracies themselves, you don't hear them, talking, smack about any, like other martial arts or something, unless it's like, clearly like those chi masters or something. But I think it's important, especially, for, those beginner level, BJJ guys, white belts and blue belts and stuff, to understand, where does your art come from, right? It's very important to know that.
Yeah.
You have Japanese roots, if you go far back enough.
I made a policy at my studio for my adults. So every week we run our school kind of like yours, where every week is a different focus on study, right? So for that week, let's say we're studying Takagi Yoshinru. They need to bring in 3 facts about Takagi Yoshinru. Because
Nice.
I'm tired of asking, hey, I have brown belts and black belts. I'll ask them, hey, what can you tell me about Takagi Yoshinru? Or what can you tell me about Kuki Shinryu?
Mm.
Blank stares. And it's like, you guys are brown belts and black belts and you don't know what you're learning. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
And it's crazy because like, I feel like when we were going up through the ranks, it wasn't like that.
Oh no, it was different. It was very different.
You know,
But I would like to also think that other than the time, I think that I think we were also very fortunate to be around that group of people also, like that, those like-minded people. And we were a pretty big group. I was surprised, like nowadays, finding a traditional Japanese martial arts school, especially like in Nimpo, right? Or traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu, like that's rare, I think. And I think we had a really good big group of people there.
but the funny part is like, I don't feel like I'm teaching any differently versus how I was taught, you know, um, in the sense of like knowing your history and things like that. You know what I mean? And my students take notes too sometimes, and they still like, it's like, are you studying your notes when you get home? Like, like why take notes if you're not going to look at them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just so I don't get mad. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If you're not going to look at them, you might as well just tell me, hey, I'm not going to take my notes because I'm not going to look at them later. Well, you know what I mean? Then you're really not going to pass anything. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So I just find that really odd. Um, when taking like, Japanese martial art, kobudo, or, something like that.
Yeah.
That you don't know where it comes from, or any characteristics of, certain ruha, or certain characteristics of like the sword you're learning, and things like that. So
Yeah, no, it is. And I think, yeah, this is a generational thing as well, right? And we're looking at now in the 2020s, it's like people are only looking ahead. No one looks back anymore, right? And usually you would say that in a sense of in a positive way, but in this sense, it's like it's a negative, right? Know your
Yeah.
history. I would say know your history, know the future, right?
Yep.
And I feel like every year that goes by, society in general just continues to lose touch with its history, and so we are doomed to repeat the same mistakes we've made in history. We don't, if you don't know where you come from, I mean, it's important to know that, right? Like traditionally my family is like South Asian, right? And Middle Easterners and South Asians, for example, just like East Asians, are very, very big on tracking like our ancestry. Like I can track my ancestry back like more than like 1,000 years, maybe not 1,000. Actually, I'd say probably about actually almost 1,000. Actually, maybe a little bit more.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, but that's not very uncommon either. For Asians, like in general, I would say like South or East Asians, or people like Middle Eastern people as well. It's just natural, So me especially, I definitely prefer history. I love history. I like knowing where the art comes from. Every other art, but that's also a personal thing as well.
Gotcha. So yeah, so
Tournaments.
yeah, tournaments. You want to talk about tournaments?
Yeah. So
You want to talk about the Kumite?
the Kumite. Yeah, I wish I had a T-shirt that said Kumite. That would be really cool. Tournaments are
next year.
like,
It's
what's
every
that?
5. It's every 5 years. It's next year. It's in Hong Kong.
Hey, if you spill it, Frank Dukes is gonna come after you. But yeah, so tournaments, are they good or bad for martial arts in general? So tournaments, let's define tournaments, right? Lewis, how are you going to define tournaments? Like, what kind of tournaments are you speaking about?
I would say tournament is not UFC.
Okay.
I would consider that something different.
Okay.
Even though it's kind of like a tournament, but when I picture a tournament, I picture like, you know, um, you go to a venue, whatever, and you have multiple categories to compete in: sparring, grappling,
Sure.
weapons,
So
whatever.
at a local level, you're not talking about professional fighting, things like that. So like even like BJJ, they have tournaments, right? Judo, they
Yeah,
have tournaments.
yeah,
Karate, Taekwondo. Usually when you see like karate or Taekwondo, they're usually grouped in there with Tang Soo Do, Kung Fu schools and stuff, like a lot of the um martial arts that are, like purely like striking, right?
right.
Because I've I judged and refereed my first tournament last year, and it was like Tang Soo Do, Taekwondo, different forms of karate, a few different kung fu schools, and maybe I missed like one other, but that was pretty much like the gist of it.
Right. Yeah. So I think we're on the same page there.
Okay, all right. So what I think it depends on the type of I don't want to say tournament. It depends on like what you're doing in the tournament, right? For example, let's start off with something easy, right? Forms like katas. I think it's good to know your forms to practice them, right? What I don't like are young kids screaming to heavy metal music and throwing, they look like ballerinas, throwing their like 6-foot staffs in the air up in front of them, turning around, catch them. Sure, that stuff looks cool. It looks really cool, and I appreciate the skill level and the amount of effort and practice they put into it. And they could be doing other bad things out on the street or whatever instead of doing that, which I'll give them that. But let's be real, this is martial arts. We're calling it
Right.
martial arts for a reason, right? So keep it focused on like combat.
So I would
Um,
consider what you just explained more like cheerleading or dancing
yeah, it is, and you see that at a lot of tournaments
yeah.
as well, right?
Or
Um,
gymnastics.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Gymnastics, right? Right. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Um, but otherwise, I think like look at like when they do like katas in the Olympics. I think a lot of that stuff is looks pretty legit, especially like for karate. Um, now point sparring. I have mixed opinions about point sparring, right? Like it is fun. It hands down it's fun, right? Most of the like the likelihood of getting knocked out is obviously significantly lower than doing something like continuous sparring or like fighting in like amateur or professional leagues and in other martial arts. You can still get hurt. You can still get knocked out, but there's some really bad habits that point sparring gives, right? There's some good and bad. The bad is you're not taught to follow up and throw exchanges. Sometimes like if sometimes you'll be told, right, keep throwing combos till a ref tells you to stop, right, till they score a point. I get it, but a lot of times, and I've seen this in person, where someone blocks an attack like a kick, and the person that threw the kick still gets a point. Now, here's the thing, like, you can throw a kick and you could have your hands down, you land the kick, and that person is now in a position to really hit you hard, like right after that. But the ref stops it because, the person that landed a kick just scored a point.
Right.
So now, they're developing bad habits because they're just aiming for one hit, land one hit. And it doesn't even have to be hard, right? It just has to tap. It's
Right.
basically like tag, right?
Yeah.
Like a harder tag.
That's what I
So
call it.
it
Tag.
creates really bad habits. What I will say on the positive side is footwork, because it's almost like, like you have a weapon in your hand where, first one to get hit, like a sword or a knife, like that's it. You're pretty much out.
Yep.
So they have really good footwork. They're really quick on their feet.
So can I add something to that? And
Yeah.
people
I mean, that was actually the end of mine.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
People might hate me and I don't care. And some of your students might hate me, but Taekwondo is not a self-defense art. I don't care what anybody says. I'll argue with anybody all day about it. It is not a self-defense art. Now, can you defend yourself knowing some Taekwondo? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Somebody's coming at you, right? I don't know, trying to mug you or something, and you sidekick them in the chest or in the stomach, or you, you land a roundhouse to their face, knock them out. Yeah, it can happen. But the reason why I'm saying this is because, like, um, we have a community group. It's got like hundreds of thousands of members in this community group in our area, right? And at least once a week, somebody will ask about martial arts lessons, either for themselves or their child. You know,
Mm.
you know, where could I go to? Who's the most cost effective? Things like that. Where can I go to learn self defense? Right. And you always get these uneducated people that say, "Oh, Taekwondo." If somebody's asking for self defense, right? Oh, go to this Taekwondo school, right? We were there, we loved it. They have such a great program, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not denying that that they're not a good school.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. But if you're recommending somebody that's asking for self defense, a self defense school, a self defense art, you're recommending Taekwondo. You have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
I think this gets into one of those things, and I like that you're getting like controversial. It always makes discussion more exciting. It depends on your definition of self-defense, right? Because like, let's be real. At the end of the day, anything with teaching, like, actually, a lot of self-defense schools are gonna hate me for this. And obviously, like we call ourselves. I mean, I'm shadow combatives and self-defense. That's my dojo's name too. And I'm saying this: when you go to a school to learn to fight, you're learning about 5% of self-defense, maybe 10%, right? 5 to 10% of self-defense. 90%, at least 90% of self-defense is non-physical, right?
Correct.
Now we are talking about specifically, that 5 to 10% where
Right,
it
that's
does
what I'm
get,
talking about. Yeah.
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 But in that case, I wouldn't necessarily agree that it's completely useless. I see it from a legal perspective, though, right? If you're throwing, like, you keep punching or you keep kicking someone, it's actually not that effective unless the person is your size or smaller, right? Or you're just really well trained and you can take on someone that's much bigger than you. But that's a rare case. So throwing punch, like striking is good in weight classes, right?
Right.
That's the main issue with it. But in like self-defense in general, we talk about judo, BJJ, jiu-jitsu, grappling arts like wrestling. These are really good for self-defense because you learn how to restrain people, and you learn how to obviously hip throws and and yada yada. Like some of my students, who train at another TKD school also, um, they actually teach things like this, like what we call tehodoki, by the way. Like they call it like their self-defense class, where they teach like wrist grabs or wrist escapes and things, and some like hip throws and stuff. But it's not TKD then.
Yeah, that's not Taekwondo. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to get at. So
Yeah, exactly.
that's
That proves the
exactly what I was
point.
going to say.
Yeah.
Including what I was saying is, do Taekwondo schools, some Taekwondo schools teach some self-defense stuff? Yeah, they do. That's not Taekwondo. That's jujitsu,
Right.
or judo or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, I've never, and I've been doing this a long time, never been in a Taekwondo school where, their focus is mainly for tournaments and sparring, right? And tag, right? I call it tag.
Yeah.
That's their main focus, and
Especially the schools, and sorry to cut you off, but especially the schools that have like buses, because those are the schools that are like almost completely focused on kids.
right,
And
they're completely
obviously
focused
like
on
tournaments
kids
for them.
and
Yep.
retention.
Yes.
Yep. So the tournaments create retention, because think about it. Um, you know, um, it creates a competitive atmosphere. You know what I mean? It's what sometimes drives people to keep signing up for soccer teams and football teams and baseball teams because they want to win, right? They want that championship. They want that MVP award. You know what I mean? People like that stuff. Us as humans like to be competitive and win
Right.
things and stuff like that.
Right.
But that's not why I'm doing my tournament though. I'm doing it to assess skill. That's why I'm doing mine. Um, but yeah, I I forget. I was going on a tangent and stuff, and it has to do with the tournaments that we were talking about. But I think tournaments, they help and they don't help, and the reasons they help is because they teach, especially for kids, they teach you how to lose and keep going, like to do it again. Like if you lose at a tournament and never go back to one,
Are
then
you saying that as a negative or a positive?
it's a positive.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying it as a negative. I'm like, wait, that sounds like that's a good thing to me.
No, it's a positive. So like,
Yeah.
let's say like you go to a tournament and you lose and you're like, I'm never doing this again because I lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you never do, then you know that's messed up in my opinion. You should go back. You should figure out, all right, what did I do bad at? This is where I need to improve. Go back and try to win, and so that way you can overcome something. It teaches you how to overcome adversity, right? Um, I think tournaments are bad in the sense for self-defense because you're working within a set of rules, right? Like for example, our tournament, yeah, it's continuous sparring, but I don't really have a lot of face contact. The rules are um it could be light to medium kicking to the side of the head, and that's it. There's no
Mm,
strikes to the head or anything like that, because somebody can get knocked out really easy with like an uppercut or something like that, and I don't want that. I want a good day of competitiveness and sportsmanship and all that fun stuff, right? Um, you're not striking to the face, right? So
mm.
in a real fight, that happens all the time,
Yeah,
so
that's the
um
most common place to get hit in
exactly,
against an especially against an untrained fighter is all the face of the head.
exactly. So and oh, another thing on the whole taekwondo thing, um I can't tell you how many times I've had taekwondo practitioners come into my school and kind of brag on how good they are and stuff. And then as soon as I grapple them, they have no idea what to do.
Yeah,
Zero. And
yeah,
and then they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't know what to do." But it's like,
yeah.
how are you going to defend yourself if you go to the ground? Can't kick
Right.
it, you can't get it, kick it, can't, do a flying side kick from the ground,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Let me tell you, I hear this a lot also from, TKD, like some of my students that train in TKD and some of my friends that train in TKD is like their primary art. They say the same thing. Well, I'm just not going to let them catch me. I will tell you from all the times that I've been in street fights growing up, you will get caught. You will
Oh
go
yeah.
down to the ground eventually. It doesn't always happen, right? It doesn't always happen. Um, but I will let me rephrase that then. There's a strong likelihood that you could end up on the ground because, like just because you're in a tournament, you step out of bounds and you get asked to come back in the center. That doesn't happen in real life, right? Eventually you're gonna hit a wall. Like, you're gonna run into the crowd, you're gonna run into a car, a fence, something. And then what are you
Yeah.
gonna do?
Yep.
You only have so much space.
Yeah.
And you keep
So
running around and around, and who knows? Then there might be someone else that jumps in.
yeah, you're right. So I think it does help, but it doesn't help. You know, it's like
Yeah.
it's like everything in life. There's a good and bad to everything.
Well, I do want to add another thing also, right? I think when it comes to point sparring specifically, I'm not a fan, right? Like I said, it's enjoyable. There's some couple things that you can get out of it. That's good. Like learning to be really quick on your feet, as in like not wanting to get hit. That's what point sparring is good for. Learning to be fast on your feet so you don't get hit. Because if you do, that's a point scored, right? Continuous sparring, on the other hand, I think is a lot more in line with how I prefer sparring to be. And for those that don't know, when we say continuous sparring in the world of like karate and taekwondo and tang soo do and stuff like that, there's it's not really a point system, but you basically just go until it's not till you knock someone out. If you don't really, obviously there's judges, right? So depending on your performance, you'll win. If you don't knock them out, but you can knock them out. Um, and depending on the type of tournament, the age bracket can be a lot larger. It could be smaller. There could be weight limits. There could be like height limits, things like that. In some tournaments, there are none. Again, the smaller tournaments, you're less likely to run into stuff like that. The bigger tournaments, more likely to end up in like weight categories and things like that.
Right.
So
Right.
I am for continuous sparring. I do like that aspect, but point sparring, not a fan.
Yeah, I would agree.
Either way, I will say for those of us who train in Japanese jiu-jitsu, we need to get our butts up off the mats and out of the woods, and start going to some kind of like BJJ tournaments or wrestling or whatever it is, or judo tournaments or something. Even striking. I think that's one thing that's we talk about things we don't like about TKD and BJJ and stuff, but I think obviously there's a lot of really awesome techniques in jiu-jitsu, but man, we really need to pressure test them more in a live environment against, I think, other people so that the art thrives, and you can make the argument, and sorry if I'm going off on a tangent, but people can make the argument and say, well, that's why, Kano Jiu-Jitsu started. No, Kano Jiu-Jitsu changed, his style to literally counter the other jiu-jitsu schools that were dominating everyone. So he started incorporating more like, newaza, as we say in old jiu-jitsu, we say suwariwaza, but ground techniques, right? He started doing that literally to win tournaments, to win matches against other dojos.
Right.
That was the whole reason. It wasn't, like a real world type of thing. It was literally just to beat other schools.
Right.
That was the whole reason why they started going towards the ground. So I think that there's still room for, growth and, for traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu to evolve.
Yeah. And that's why they started the UFC. So they can,
That's a good point. Yeah.
So they can, show everybody how, their art was, superior to everybody else's. You know what I mean?
I mean, one-on-one BJJ is phenomenal. It's hard to, like you would, I can't, one-on-one, it's either one or two, again, like in an organized setting, BJJ is phenomenal in that regard. I don't think anyone can take that away from them. Personally, it sounds like me being a hater a little bit. I'm going to say judo number one, BJJ close second, but they're both like one or two, interchangeable.
Yeah, I would agree. All right. Well, I think that's it.
It is. Man, these are some big topics, and I think I just want to, as we end this this episode, just for anyone to know, right? Like, Lewis and I are just fans of martial arts in general, right? We are actually very critical of even the stuff that we train in. We are critical of every martial art. We understand that not every martial art is perfect, but obviously, like, we do have our opinions on, certain things. Everyone trains for different things. Some people for tournaments, some people just for pure self-defense, some people for, like just, outside fighting, doesn't really matter. As we call it, like combatives, right? Like do what you can or survive. I'd say that aligns more with like what Lewis and I train in.
Yeah.
But
we're just two brown guys getting by through life doing martial arts.
I don't know what to say to that. All right, good night.
Sayonara.
Sayonara.